Welcome to The Craft. I'm your host, May Globus. This podcast is a collection of intimate conversations on artistry, mastery, and life with talented, passionately curious creatives and entrepreneurs. Most are dear friends, some are those I've admired from afar. I hope you enjoy these conversations, this exploration of the humanity that connects all of us, as much as I do having them. Thank you for being here and for listening. Having a conversation with Nate Sabine is one of my favorite things to do. I always walk away with a perspective I haven't thought of before. Growing up in Terrace, BC as a skate kid, he left his small hometown in the mid-90s for a bigger city, but not without bringing his interest for skate culture, music, style, and hospitality along with him. For the last 25 years, Nate's been a leader in the entertainment and music industry, heading up brand and marketing for the Donnelly Group, before becoming the Director of Business Development for Blueprint Entertainment. In this conversation, we explore his younger years growing up biracial, navigating changes in his industry with the pandemic, mental health, being a father, and much, much more. Please enjoy this wide-ranging talk with the one and only Nate Sabine. Nate, welcome to the show. Welcome to The Craft.
Hi, May. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited for this conversation. I feel like we have regular conversations, but it's nice to have this one recorded so we can share it with others.
No doubt, for posterity and all that.
Definitely for posterity.
Yeah.
I know that the other day we were talking about how we were connected, and it sounds like we met like 10 years ago at some Donnelly event through our mutual friend Tiffany, who's one of the best publicists in the biz.
She sure is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I still kind of dispute the timeline a little bit. I feel like it was a little bit earlier, but sure, like 10, 12 years ago. Yeah.
And you were with the Donnelly Group back then.
I was, yeah. I was a brand and marketing director for 5.5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we just figured out we had a mutual web of friends, as the city often has amongst people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it kind of went from there.
It really did.
Yeah.
Let's take it back. You're from Terrace, BC, and you're a skateboard kid.
Yeah.
What was it like?
Still am.
Yes.
I mean, it was pretty idyllic in a lot of ways. Like it's beautiful up there, and when you're quite young, like I had no kind of like I didn't feel othered or like I didn't fit in for my childhood years. It was comfortable. It was beautiful. I didn't realize that my family didn't have a ton of money. Like my dad was really well educated and very, very intelligent, as was my mom, but didn't care about money. You know, my dad worked at the college. My mom worked on like sort of like this program called Reconnect, where she reconnected Indigenous youth with their communities and stuff like that. So, you know, things that are altruistic and awesome, but not a lot of dough. But again, I had no idea, and it was like that, and it was dope until, you know, I had two sisters and a brother. So we had, you know, there's 6 of us. It was awesome. But then, you know, I started getting older and looking around and listening to a lot of hip hop and punk and all that stuff, and being a skateboarder and just going, like, realizing that it was really messed up, the place that I was living, and wanting to get out a lot, being kind of really, really angry and disenfranchised and all the rest of it. And I couldn't wait to get out. And here's where I ended up, you know? So I left pretty much as soon as I graduated. Like I got out of high school, barely, and I saved a bunch of money and moved down here. I moved in with my older sister right downtown at Butte and Barclay, which was just off Robson Street, which back in the day, that's, you know, people were still like cruising down Robson Street, and you know what I mean? Like that was what you kind of did. And then, I don't know, all the clubs and the skating and just everything. It was, it was what I wanted at the time. Yeah.
You were saying that at some point you realized that things were messed up where you were living. What do you mean by that?
Just looking at the racial makeup and the racism a lot. You know, I went to school with a ton of Indigenous kids, and they had it really tough, and a lot of them came from tough backgrounds as well. And it was in retrospect, it was on full display, just in the actions, the way that people carried themselves and stuff like that. The way that my friends' parents would talk about at pretty much everybody else or every other race when I was present. And, I could only assume, and a few times I caught them talking about, like using the N-word and stuff like that too. And again, I didn't, because my parents were such, how do I say, they were social justice warriors kind of thing. And they were kind of turn the other cheek type of people, to a certain degree. And I was kind of like, but by the time I got old enough, I was just kind of like, fuck yourself. Like, if that's how you perceive things and that's like what you're talking about, whatever. But I mean, I remember doing a grade 11 or 12 project, and it was me and two other dudes, and our thing was going to interview a head nurse at the hospital up there. So we go, and it's all pretty normal. And then at the end of the interview, she just throws out there that she has her own beliefs about certain things that don't fit into the hospital's value system. And one of those beliefs is that, people shouldn't mate outside of their race. And she's saying this looking right at me.
Wow.
And I'm going like, what the like things that people would just lose their job for nowadays. But that's kind of, it was so much the norm. Mm-hmm. And, everything that you could think of was just thrown at you or thrown around you. And it was really kind of ugly. And it definitely made me feel like, even though I personally got along fine because I was smart, people liked me, like whatever, and also because I didn't give a shit. But it wasn't anywhere that I pictured myself, or that, I just knew that it was messed up. It went against everything that I was reading and hearing and that I believed in.
Yeah.
And I think probably every small town is like that. I mean, everywhere is like that to a certain extent, but it's, when you're in a town like that and it's a microcosm of the world, it's just so much more obvious.
Right. And your perspective was so much wider, so you had to go somewhere bigger.
Oh, yeah. When I was 14 and my brother was 13, my aunt who lived in England, so my dad grew up in Barbados and he came to Canada on scholarship. So he went to U of T and then he went to UBC. But his sister went to England. And so when we were 14, 13, they brought us over there for a month. And it was the most transformative month of my life. Like, it was the first time I was around all black people all the time, and all these crazy accents and, rituals and just the community. It was crazy to be the lightest skinned people there and to be kind of outside the culture, but just absorbing it all. And I remember walking through London and seeing posters for like De La Soul and stuff, who had just performed there. Like, I think we had missed the De La Soul concert by like 5 days. And you know what I mean? I bought all these rap tapes that I couldn't get in Canada and all this sort of stuff. And I got a flat top and came back to Canada. I was just, it was like I was kind of radicalized at that point. And I never looked back as far as all the rest of it. And again, I was young and I was mad and all that stuff. And so it was easy for me to just dismiss everything that didn't fit in. But I was pretty mad.
Yeah. How did you feel when you met that side of your family? Like, did it feel like home? Did it feel like?
Yeah. That's a great question. It really kind of did. It felt much more natural than what I was experiencing on the day to day. And I don't know if that was a construct that was in my head or if that's really the way it was, but no, it felt amazing. And it felt like I was missing out. And even though, that was my culture, like, quote unquote, it gave me a lot of respect for the way that any other culture is. I started thinking about how really we don't have any idea of how other cultures are, and that's one of the things that even still bothers me today, or that I think about a lot today, is that when we talk about multiculturalism and we talk about, everybody getting along and all these sorts of things. And like, absolutely, we should get along, but you need to recognize the differences. And I feel like people don't want to talk about that too much. People want to be like, oh, we're all the same. We're all human beings. Like, yeah, of course we are. But you need to recognize where people are coming from, and you have to meet people where they are. And to me, that's one of the biggest divides and the biggest and simplest things that's dividing us right now. It's just meeting people where they are.
Right. Because there's a level of understanding that's just beyond, like you said, we're all humans. It's like that person's culture. What's the history of that culture and what they've been through? There's generational trauma. There's just so many layers.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But yeah, I mean, when I moved here, it was really quite eye-opening, and it was everything that I wanted to see. Like going to rap shows and going to nightclubs and skating at spots and meeting these dudes that I had only seen in videos and stuff like that. It was amazing for like an 18, 19-year-old kid to go through.
And then you found yourself in entertainment and hospitality.
So yeah, I guess around 1999, 2000 or something, I started promoting rap shows, like independent rap shows, and dudes that were local, like Mocha Only, Kipriosos type of dudes, and then we scaled up. Eventually, we brought in a partner named Kyle Kraft, who ran Battle Axe Records for a long time. He's what up, Crafty? He's an amazing dude. Anyway, so yeah, we did probably over 300 shows, and then that just kind of turned, just being in the culture, you know what I'm saying? Like being into fashion, being into skateboarding, being into music, I started managing rap groups and doing all this stuff, and myself and Tim Knight and Tony Ferguson opened up the A-Life store, and we were doing clothing distro and had a Shine nightclub and all that stuff. Like it was wild times. This is probably 2003, 4, like around there. I think we opened A-Life in 2005. And then things got a little more serious because the Donnelly guys knocked on my door, and I came over as their director of marketing in 2006. Yeah.
And you were there for a number of years, yeah?
Yeah, I was there for 5.5 years, which at the time seemed like a long time. And that was probably the longest that I had held a job. But now I've been with Blueprint for 8 years, and it's gone by like a flash. So it's one of those things, like time is relative. But Donnelly was that was like boot camp for getting things done. I think we opened 2 stores every year when I was there. We were booking DJs. I was responsible for everything from what the staff was wearing to the marketing to, advertising, PR, like bang, bang, bang. Just really, really serious, like turned it up a lot. And those guys got hated on a lot. We got hated on a lot at the time, but, it was gentrifiers or whatever it was. But,
yeah.
It is what it is, and it was what it was. But it was a learning, like a crazy. Like I couldn't pay for that education, and working with or for dudes like Jeff Donnelly or like Alvaro now or like Tim Knight. It's crazy the insight that those guys have. Yeah.
What do you think it is about your personality that makes you so good at your job? Because you went from brand marketing director, and now you're doing business development at Blueprint. So there's this sort of natural evolution of things. Yeah, what do you think it is about you?
You know what? I actually don't think that I'm really good at my job. Like I've never really sat back and thought that. So thank you for saying so. But I really like people. I really like politics. I shouldn't say that. I like meeting people. I don't really, really like people, which is not, it's not the same thing. I like meeting people. I like collaboration. I really like politics. And when you think about, or the way that I think about it, everything is politics. There are always things you have to navigate. There are always deals to be made. There's always interest to consider and all the rest of it. And
so do you think you're good at reading people?
I think so.
That's what it is?
I do think that I'm pretty good at reading people. I'm a pretty, I'm a sensitive dude myself. I care about people. Like I care about people's feelings. I never want somebody to feel, like shamed or othered or less than or anything like that. I don't want them to feel disrespected. Um, and I want to hear what they have to say until I don't want to hear it anymore. I think I have a
Yeah.
better idea or something like that. But um, I I also think that it's just a natural progression that's happened because marketing and all that kind of stuff is really, and this is something I didn't realize in the early days for a long time, it's very bottom line driven. That's you are pushing people, you're pulling people in, you're doing whatever you can to sell a product or to get people into your doors or to market a brand or whatever it is. Um, so I think that learning all those things and then coming to business development and what I do right now is kind of I'm at the intersection of business development, sponsorship, brand building, and marketing. So it's all kind of like I'm kind of still in the same thing a little bit, but I'm not doing all of the marketing exercises or following up with the team. So I think it's kind of natural, but you know, it's interest and it's I don't know.
Yeah,
Just
it's big picture stuff that you're doing now. A lot more
yeah, real
strategic rather than the doing.
yeah,
Yeah.
It's a lot more fun now.
Yeah.
I mean, I actually I shouldn't say that. It's always been a lot of fun, but it's a lot different now. It's a lot more strategy now and you know thinking as opposed to just always doing and grinding.
Right. Yeah, it's that long-term sustainability. How is this brand company going to sustain into the future?
Yeah, and it's crazy
Yeah.
because you don't think all the time about what you're doing or about how your actions or whatever could affect the company or you just kind of do things. And sometimes I look back and I'm going like, wow, 5 years ago I could never imagine taking on something like this. But yeah, you just grow.
You just grow and
it
do.
feels natural. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess right now, well, in the last 9 months, there is a lot of strategy that probably had to happen. 2020 happened, basically.
Yeah.
And so your industry had to make a lot of pivots, having to rethink things. What was one of the hardest moments for you during the pandemic, which is still going, but as a leader?
The hardest moment was realizing that we are going to have to lay off 500 plus people. That we really didn't have a choice, that everything was shutting down. Because even though we kind of saw it coming, we saw it cascading down through all the other countries and all this sort of stuff, and big festivals shutting down and all that, everything. When it hit us and we were like, oh, goddamn, now this is here, this is us. That was the big one. But then 2 or 3 months later, when we realized that it wasn't going away, that it was going to be much longer than anyone had anticipated, that was probably harder. When it first happened, I'd be lying if I said that I thought that we wouldn't be back by September. Like in my head, when it was happening, I thought we'd lose the summer, we'd be back by September, October, and we'd be okay. I never thought we'd be here. And that it's completely naive, but I mean, I don't know shit about pandemics. I do now, but that was a hard one because I mean, I know I'm in a stage of my life. I'm gonna be okay-ish if the world is, if society's okay. But when I think, because that's where I came from, like from being a kid just hustling, from being a bartender, from being a busboy when I was a kid. Like my first job here was washing dishes in a restaurant. When you think about those people, and we employ a ton of people like that, and knowing that's where I came from, and again, having a family that couldn't really help me out, like there wasn't extra money laying around, and I'm thinking like, holy Christ, we got to lay off all these kids, these people. That was tough. But then I guess after that, the tough part was being asked about it all the time.
Right.
And doing media. just getting out there and telling the story about how hard you'd been hit. That was always a little bit of a bitch. And then the other thing after that, what really was doing the work to raise awareness at a provincial and federal level and try and get some action behind the industry. That was really hard because you're dealing with things like myself. I have a family, all these responsibilities. We're doing all these things, and then you're still working, trying to get some money raised or get some funds put aside for your industry and
Right.
all of that. And it was really heavy duty.
And you're quite involved. You're on the board of Music BC, correct?
Yeah, which is somewhat new, but we launched a program called Sound On back in June, July, I think it was, with Music BC, with a couple of other producers and somebody from the city, Jarrett Martineau, it was really gratifying. It felt good because we were getting people back to work a little bit. We were making a little bit of a difference. But yeah, no, the Music BC actually being on the board is new, but I'm on the board of the DVBIA as well, and I sit on committees. I sit on a committee with Creative BC too. So all of these things, and everyone's coming, trying to come together and figure something out. And you saw kind of everything and everybody, all of the reactions from people that were solid and feeling, understanding things were going to come back, to people that thought they were losing everything and were going into a deep, dark place. And so through all these industries, through tourism, hospitality, entertainment, like even sports a little bit, dealing with all these people and just seeing all the humanity of it was really, really tough.
Yeah. I read a interesting article. I suggest everyone reads it. The writer Mark Manson, he always does a reflection on the year at the end of the year. And he sent a call out to all of his readers to ask them, what they learned through 2020 and the pandemic. And then what he did was he compiled all of the answers and he found themes, and he came up with 10 major themes that came up. And you were just talking about, people's reactions and what range. And what came out of his research and findings was that people during the pandemic, whatever their default setting was just amplified. So if you were anxious, you became more anxious. If you're optimistic, you became more optimistic. It was an interesting insight, and I've seen that in my world too, just this scale of how people reacted emotionally to all of this.
It's been incredibly tough. And you and I were talking the other day, and I was saying how at a certain point I got fed up with people that couldn't sacrifice, seeing their family or going on a picnic or whatever it was. And I was kind of like, just hunker down. It's, our parents, or many of our parents or grandparents or whatever, went through wars and did all, like Vietnam was kind of our war. Like I grew up reading about Vietnam, watching TV shows, like all this sort of stuff. To me, that was more of a sacrifice. World War II was a huge sacrifice when, every manufacturing just went straight to weaponry. Women had to go to work, and, there were people dying all over the place, all this horrible stuff. I'm like, really? You can't just wear a mask and shut the hell up for 6 months kind of thing? But I softened on that a lot recently, like I was saying, because it is hard. Everything is relative, and just the monotony, the Groundhog Day of it, and thinking about all the people that have to go out there and actually go into high-risk situations. And I'm not just talking about frontline workers and stuff like that, but I don't know, people that are delivering all this food, or people that are working in our bars and restaurants and all this sort of stuff that either don't have a choice or, it's hard. It's absolutely crazy. But, we'll see the end of it. Like, thank God.
Yeah.
But this is going to be the defining thing for.
Oh, absolutely. Like even for me, and looking at my life, like, wow, this is definitely a defining year, even for me personally. But I just wanted to go back to the entertainment and music industry, and we were talking about pivots and things like that. Is the industry forever changed?
You know what? I don't really think so.
Hmm.
I don't think that fundamentally it's changed. Um, there's been talk for years about AR and VR and those sorts of things, and you know, and I get it. That's very. We've looked at a lot of solutions and putting somebody that's in Australia that wants to be at our festival in Vancouver, putting them front and center and do like a VR headset or whatever it is, like that type of thing. Um, Sure, and it seems a lot more real right now, given all the streaming options and what everybody's been doing, and it's been fantastic. I really do feel that the creative industries, whether it's music or theater, ballet, whatever it is, they've really shown their creativity and resilience.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that when things come back online, there's going to be any replacement for going to a theater, going to a concert, those sorts of things. Um, I know for sure I can tell you that artists aren't asking for any less money than they're making.
Of course.
Because we're in the process of booking for a year from now, and no, everybody, it's all still the same. Like the machinery is
Mm-hmm.
still there, and people have a certain value or however they want to look at it. So no,
Mm.
I don't. For a while, like if you talked to me 6 months ago, I might have said yes, but I don't really think so. I think that other aspects, or rather other industries have changed. Like I think that hospitality and the food service industry has probably changed fundamentally much
Mm.
more so than entertainment.
Right, right. So yeah, because Spotify's doing all those online concerts, with
Mm.
amazing artists, and you pay $10, and but I guess there really is no replacement for listening to music live, or like you
No,
said, seeing theater and shows live.
no, there just isn't. Um, what people, 'cause there are a lot of think pieces out about this sort of stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
but what people don't understand or fail to remember is that we are social animals. Like whether you want to admit it or not, even like the most antisocial or introverted person, you need to be around other people.
Yeah.
And like all the talk about the roaring 20s that are going to happen, all that stuff aside, because yeah, sure it is. Um, we're built to be around each other.
Mm-hmm.
That's really what it is, and to share experiences with each other. So maybe incrementally we'll see like the virtual or the online side of attending an experience. Maybe it's grown by a few percent, but I think we're going to see most of that stuff and all the streaming stuff drop away as soon
Hmm.
as people can go out again.
Right, right. So it's more like an addition rather than a replacement for what
Exactly.
was.
Exactly.
Hmm.
I mean, do I think in 100 years that's going to be? Yeah, yeah, I really do. I really do. That's that there's no other future but that, as far as I'm
Hmm.
concerned. But that's a long ways off.
Right, right. And with this sacred pause, as some are calling it, I actually really
Hmm.
like the term.
I hadn't heard that.
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember where I heard it, but I thought, that sounds about right for me. What did it bring up for you personally?
You know what? Not. Hmm. Hmm. Not as much as you might think.
Mm.
It kind of like it gave me a lot more time with my daughter, which is incredibly valuable, but not that much. I mean, you were just saying that how it has brought out people's traits. Like if you're anxious, you're curious, you're curious. And kind of that's kind of where I went with it too. I ended up being able to read a little bit more and kind of think a little bit more, but it didn't really change my trajectory a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of I thought about values a lot.
Hmm.
But where I'm at, and it's not a plug, but with Blueprint, our values are really, really solid and aligned with my own personal ones. And no, I didn't have a lot to.
What are those values?
Well,
Well, if they
in
would
in
line
a
with yours, I'm
in
curious about
yeah, yeah,
yours.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Mine are very, very simple. Like, be a good person, be good to other people. Um, you know, take action about where you can and help your community and those around you. Um, don't beat yourself up. You know, understand that you make mistakes, that everybody makes mistakes, and you need to be forgiving, that sort of thing. And yeah, just try not to be judgmental. At Blueprint, our values are much more. We have like 4 pillars and all that sort of stuff. But for me, it really it's very simple. It's like, don't be a dick.
Yeah.
Try not, and as much as in the past I have been, like when you're young and brash and all that sort of stuff. But no, just try your best to be a good person. And if you don't feel right, get help. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah.
Like that. I mean, and that's actually maybe the one meditation that I came across. Like, and you know how I feel about mental health. And
Yeah, I was just going to get into that, but yeah, I'll let you
okay,
finish.
yeah. But anyway, that's probably the biggest thing, because I've seen that come out in so many more people than I would have expected. Where I'm like, yo, do something.
Yeah.
Don't be ashamed of this. Like, go and get some help. Like, sort yourself out.
Yeah. And you and another podcast guest, good friend of ours, Garrett Louie, you guys launched a series called Mental Wealth, right?
That's right.
Yeah. And I remember going to the first one, and I believe you had a pro skateboarder. Was he a pro skateboarder?
Snowboarder.
Snowboarder, yes. And he had a mental breakdown, and now he's really involved in speaking about mental health. And it was a very raw talk. And during his Q&A, I remember wondering if there was going to be a ton of engagement from the audience. There were a lot of young people in hospitality and entertainment that were there. And I ended up being really struck by how many people did ask questions and the types of questions. So I was hearing a lot of them ask, how do I connect with others in real life and not just virtually? And I remember that really sat with me after. And back to that thing about we're meant to be connected. But also that disconnect that the younger generation feels with how to connect in real life.
Yeah. Can you imagine having to go through that? I mean, there's obviously been disconnection for a long time, but having the alternative of the whole online world, it's something that I can't really fathom, and the influence that it has on a young person's day-to-day life. But yeah, that first one was really raw. It was really like kind of on purpose, but underproduced. We kind of just wanted, we didn't allow cameras in. We didn't record it, any of that stuff, just because we wanted people there to have a real conversation about it and be able to leave knowing that it took place there and it stayed there. But yeah, no, it was pretty moving. It was, there people were crying and stuff like that. Like it was very affecting. And I had been to one similar, but a lot more by the book that I think Creative BC had put on a couple years earlier. It was kind of it was eye-opening to me in that there were so many people who had kids that were in the music industry, and they were there on behalf of their kids saying, listen, I have a 15-year-old, she's really talented, beautiful, and she's putting herself out online. She's got this many followers, but she's getting these types of messages, or she's withdrawing because of this, or he's afraid to do this, or should they even be in the music industry, these types of things. And, again, just short-sighted or lack of experience, I had never really thought about how different the kids' experiences would be to my own. I had issues with mental health when I was in my mid-30s, early 30s maybe, that and they're like everyday things now, but when they're happening, I had no idea. I was diagnosed as generalized anxiety disorder, GAD, and that, as far as all that goes, easy to deal with and get help for and all those sorts of things. But I had a myopia about it, just thinking about people around me and my friend group and that sort of thing, without even approaching the younger generation and how harrowing that must be.
Yeah.
It's one thing when you say you're getting bullied at school in the 80s or 90s. You go to school, you get bullied, you get home, you're okay. But now, like, that stuff just follows you around. It's horrifying.
Yeah.
but yeah, and my biggest thing around it, well, you know, obviously getting help, but is removing the stigma, because the stigma is what's really um, I don't know, putting people through some pain that they don't have to go through. And I just saw a sleep therapist for entirely different reasons. Anyway, my therapist was telling me that through COVID, suicide rates have actually gone down worldwide, except in Japan. But anyway, but yeah, that they've gone down because the stigma is being removed, because everybody's talking about their mental health and how they feel and how they're struggling and how they're coping and all that sort of stuff. So, you know, call centers have gone, the calls are going through the roof, and counselors are being reached out to on record levels, which, you know, maybe back to the what do you call the COVID?
The sacred pause.
The sacred pause, maybe that is it for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Is that they can address these things and not feel shamed about them.
Yeah, absolutely. I was having a conversation with a friend, actually, another podcast guest, and we were talking about this very thing. And, you know, I'd said in some ways that pandemic has leveled the playing field for everyone in terms of mental health. It's, you know, everyone's going through it, which gives you the space to talk about it.
Yeah. And that's what it is. It's talking. It's a conversation. You know, like a dozen years ago when I was going through it, I maybe told my best friend about it, you know, and I went and did my therapy and did all that stuff, but I did it very privately. Now I'll tell almost anybody, you know what I mean? It's
Right.
just, yeah, and that was, you know, I was in my mid-30s. I was a full-grown person, but no, I wasn't willing to at the time. But yeah, that stigma, it's like anything. You know, shame is what keeps us living in our basement, and that's what you have to crawl out of your basement. You got to get the fuck out of there.
Right. It's hard work to look at the shadows and...
Yeah, I mean, we all have things that we don't want to deal with, or that, you know, that are running our show, and whether you're aware of them or not, but that's really, like, fundamentally, it's very simple. Like, human beings were super complex, but actually simple at the same time. You have to look yourself in the mirror. You have to face these things. You have to pull yourself out of the basement and start living.
Yeah, right. You know, been thinking a lot about the word thrive lately, and there's this phrase I feel like has been floating around. It's, you know, we're all meant to thrive, not survive, and it is so true.
Oh yeah, yeah. Surviving is, my God, you know, that for us living here, especially, like, that shouldn't. No one should just be surviving here. We live in arguably the best country in the world. We have all sorts of advantages. We have everything, you know. But yeah, everyone should. Oh God, I was gonna say strive to thrive, but anyway,
I know what you mean.
Yeah, no, totally.
Yeah, we're meant to, and I feel like a lot of that survival comes from, you know, the coping mechanisms that we had to develop at a really, really young age, which triggers this.
Well, everybody
survival,
armors
flight.
up. Like,
armors up, yeah, fight.
Yeah, that's what
flight.
you do. Yeah, 100%. And there's no escaping it. But, you know, you just learn ways to work around it and realize when you're armoring up, and that most of the time you don't have to.
Right.
It's kind of like a very like the Zen approach, and taking your self out of it as much as you can, your own ego and those sorts of things. A long time ago, I did something called nonviolent communication, or oh God, what's the other word for it? Compassionate communication. And the very first thing that they teach you is to remove yourself. Like, you're observing this person, you're listening to them, you're reacting to them, but with no sense of self. And it was really instructive. And again, it sounds simple. Like, I just told you how to do it, but it is hard to do, because we are made to think, especially here, like in this day and age in North America and all that sort of stuff, like you're front and center all the time.
Right.
Like we are such selfish people, really, you know? So when you're told to remove yourself from that and just listen to this person, listen to their beef, listen to what they need and react to what they need, it's really hard to do. And when you're aware of that and you start looking at people and just interacting on a day-to-day, you realize that most people aren't doing that at all.
Right.
No.
Yeah.
They're just going. Like, people just go. And you can't even be mad at them.
No, they're in their own world.
No, that's
not
how
even
we're
thinking
programmed.
about you.
You know? No, they're not. And that's another crazy one. Like, how many hours have you spent at home going, oh, God, what did I say this thing in this meeting? Or what does Susie think about me? Or no one thinks about you.
They're thinking about their lunch.
Yeah, no one cares.
Yeah. I feel like one of the things that I've been asking myself, when I'm feeling triggered in these ways too, is, is this going to matter even a day or a month from now? And if the answer is no, it's like, okay, I'm just going to.
And how often is the answer no?
All the time.
All the time.
All the time.
It really never matters. You know, it's crazy. We all tiptoe through things and try not to upset other people and all that sort of stuff, which, cool, be diplomatic, be whatever. But no, we all place way too much importance on ourselves.
And have you found, going back to the mental wellness, are you finding that the younger generation in the industry are continuing to reach out to you or to G-Man and getting your perspective on things and how they can make their way through the industry or life in general?
Yeah, fair bit. And I know that G does too. I have so much respect for that dude, and he's mentored a lot of people, and I like to think that I have as well. But, we both do, but not necessarily through mental wealth. I think we'd both like to get there one day through mental wealth and continue doing the seminars and adding some value. But it's really just a matter of, in our industry, there aren't a lot of people to, like, there's no roadmap. So you kind of look at people who've already done it or that are still doing it or whatever it is. And you feel compelled as somebody who's been doing it for way too long to take people under your wing and tell them what you know and help them out. So it kind of happens naturally that way, but not so much through the mental wealth stuff yet. Although I do have some people, the more that you open up, the more other people open up to you. But honestly, it's mostly been people in our age group that come forward and say, yo, I've been struggling with this, or I was diagnosed with this, or whatever it is. Because I actually believe that millennials don't have the same stigma attached the way that we do. Like, they will talk about it. They will, like, even though their experiences might stick with them more because of, everything, the whole online life and all that sort of stuff, but they don't quite have the same stigma that we do. Like, I don't know how your upbringing was, but my dad was very much old school West Indian, like, what are you talking about? Like, there's not a lot of feeling. There's not, it was
tough it out.
You tough it out. You suck it up. You just deal with it. Like, there was no time for that type of stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting. Like, my daughter's 4, like I was saying. It'll be interesting to see what her generation's like, because there's all these, like, mega woke parents, and they're either going to be the best or worst generation of people that have ever come out of the society. We'll see.
Well, what do you want Manny to remember most about you?
Oh. I think I just want her to remember that I was always there for her. I want her to, I don't know if she would remember or know this, but that I was a good man.
What does that mean to you?
Well, that means being there for the family and being a provider, being someone she could talk to, but also impacting the community. Um,
Sounds a lot like presence. Like you
yeah,
wanted to feel
yeah.
that you were present.
Oh, a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of that, but I also want her to understand that you're responsible to more than just yourself. So I want her. I try to model that for her and understanding. You know. Um, yeah. Yeah. I think I. God, that's a tough question. But yeah, no, I think I just want her to remember me as a good man. You know, that's the way that I remember my dad for the most part, even though like he's got a ton of flaws and there's all this craziness in his background. Again, like my dad he's 90, you know, he was born in 1930. So his life is all over the place, but ultimately he was a good man. He's a good person. He did the right things as well as he could. And I mean, that's all that any of us can ask for.
Yeah.
You can only do what you're taught.
This is really true. I mean, you have immigrant parents, and you know, my mom was the same. There is that sort of, you tough it out, you survive, and you're right. They were doing the best that they could, and it's I think it's a blessing that, you know, we are able to recognize that and evolve it in our own ways and how we want to teach our children differently.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, you know, like I was just saying, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out in real life, because the styles of parenting and the beliefs and all the rest of it and schooling, everything has changed so much in the last 30, 40 years. Like the world has changed so much. But so we'll see. We'll see if the extra attention and coddling and, you know, like reasoning through things. When Manny was like a year and a half old and I was carrying her around the ferry on the way to Victoria one time, I saw a dude with his son who must have been like, I don't know, like 8. His son was 8. And this guy's like, listen, Billy, you know, that's not fair. That's not fair, okay? And I'm going, what are you saying to your kid? Like, that's not fair? Like, because I didn't quite get it. But now I could picture myself having that conversation. You know, you have, like, agreements with your kid, like almost like, you know, a social agreement with your child, where it's like, this is okay, that's not okay. And maybe that dude's saying that's not fair is like my dad would have just said, you're not allowed to get out of the car on the ferry ride because you're being a little prick. Like, you know what I mean? But he would just said, no, you're not getting this. You're not. But it's evolved into that. I don't know.
Right.
We'll see. But
everyone's approaches are very different.
Well, they're different. But the zeitgeist behind it is kind of the same. You know, I think there's obviously the parents that are still very hardline and very either, you know, the more quote unquote traditional patrician kind of whatever, but you know, the woke parents, that's what I waited to see. I waited to see if we just mess it up or not.
Right. You're waiting with bated breath.
Yeah.
Let's see how this goes.
Oh God. Yeah, I try not to think about it. You know, it's one of those things. It's like every day at a time. Like when you look at the boomers, like my mom's generation. My mom grew up here. They're the worst. Like they went through. They had everything. The economy was booming. Everything was fantastic. All these jobs, all these kids, all these schools, everything. And then they turn into hippies, cool. And then they turn into like Wall Street scumbags. It's not been great.
Yeah.
And they were supposed to be like the best generation.
Right. They were supposed to be those game changers. Like.
No, they ended up being pretty awful. I don't mind saying this because I don't think any boomer's going to listen to this. But no, they're awful. So hopefully, you know, this new style of parenting turns out some better people.
Yeah, conscious humans.
Conscious.
I think would.
But you know, it's funny. Years ago, I was reading an interview with I don't know, Sadat X or some guy, like some really like lefty, really dope rapper, and someone was talking about conscious rap, and he's like, what do you mean conscious rap as opposed to what, like unconscious rap? And at the time I remember reading it being like, yeah, like that doesn't make any sense. Like with conscious, unconscious. Like what? But it totally, like, people are unconscious now. There's a lot of it. There's a lot of people that just, it actually is a thing now. Where you just, like, people are in their own bubble. They just do their thing. Yeah, they're completely unconscious.
Yeah, people who just go through life with no awareness of the people around them, and I'm hoping that's changing, especially after a year like this year and all of the things that had bubbled up. Some really hard, fundamental, systematic shakeups that will take a long time to smooth out, but nonetheless, there's movement.
Yeah, like, thank goodness. But yeah, it'll be very interesting. Very interesting over the next 5-10 years.
Yeah.
How this affects everything fundamentally. But again, first world problems. Like, I looked at a couple of articles that were talking about how children are going to be affected because a year of living in semi-isolation and all this sort of stuff. And I'm just going, again, what are you talking about? Like, for a kid to have to spend more time with their parents or with their brothers and sisters, or not be as socialized because they're not in school for 9 months or a year or something. I'm like, what about, like, all the stuff that goes on every day around the world that is so much worse? Or, like, my father-in-law grew up in post-war Britain. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. We're ridiculous.
Yeah, you know what? It's interesting that we're talking about this, because I was pondering this today, and how Christmas was so different for lots of people this year because, couldn't be with their families as, normal tradition would have it. And that was the same for me, not being able to fly home to California. And then I was thinking about it a couple of days ago, and being like, you know what? At the end of the day, this is 1 year out of my life that I won't be able to do what I always did. That's 1 year.
Yeah. It's nothing.
It's nothing. If everything is going the way that it's going, we should be semi back to normal by next Christmas. And so, yeah, it's again one of those things where it's like, you know what, we can do this.
Yeah, exactly.
So
we have to do this. I mean, yeah, totally. Like I was saying at the beginning of our talk, I understand it is hard. Just my neighbors, they've got 2 kids and they've this, that, and the other thing. Like, I get it. It's hard, but, like, geez, come on.
Yeah. And
it's 1 year.
Humans are, I wonder if people will look at their lives and actually realize how resilient they were through this year. Do
you think, though, like, when I think back to the beginning of this whole thing, I already forget almost every aspect of it. Like, I forget about the uncertainty because nobody knew anything. I forget about the extreme isolation. I forget about the financial worry. I forget, I don't think about all that stuff. And it's only been 9 months. So when, again, people are, I saw a headline like, oh, the end of the handshake. No one's ever going to shake hands again. I'm just going, what are you talking about? Humans are, like, we're incredible at forgetting all the really bad stuff. Like, that's just, I think that's how we get through. The same way that, you have a child and it is brutal. Like, it's hard. Your kid could be colicky, up all night, no. And then a year and a half later, you're like, let's have another kid. Like, you just forget. I think that, again, we were talking about survival mechanisms and stuff like that. I think that that's what it is. No, I don't think anyone's going to remember anything unless they journaled it, unless they actually wrote it down and care to read about it. I mean, obviously, there's going to be writers that go forensic about it and do all that stuff, and mega valuable because you want that perspective. But I think that even myself, I'm sitting here saying all this stuff. 5 years from now, I'm going to be like, yeah, that sucked, but I'm not going to remember that much about it. Like, in a real sense, I'm not going to be scarred by it. I'm not going to think about, like, the money that I lost or this, or the fact that, I don't know.
You're just going to keep going.
Yeah, you have to. Yeah. What the hell else are you going to do?
Are you a hopeful person, or are you a realist?
No. I like how you say that. Are you hopeful or realist? That tells me what you are. No, I'm definitely pessimistic most of the time. But I think that's being realist. Talk to my wife; she thinks I'm pessimistic, but I'm like, I look at what's going on around me, right? I believe in dystopia. I believe that we're already living in it, but I don't know, in like pop culture terms, I believe in like a Terminator, RoboCop, Blade Runner kind of like that is the future, and we're already living in it like much more than we know. And maybe that's cool. Maybe that is the way with this many people on the planet and all this sort of stuff that we have to live, constant surveillance, like blah blah blah. Economic inequality, like it's going out of style, and
lack of water in countries, aka
water,
Mad Max.
Like the climate, all that sort of stuff. No, I don't. I'm not very hopeful. To be honest. But again, you just have to go through, and you're here. What are you gonna do?
Yeah, but make the most of it, and like you said, be a good human.
Yeah, like try and make your time and other people's time on this planet as decent as possible. Like just be decent.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, we're not heading anywhere good, I don't think.
Yeah. I feel like you may have asked or answered my last question, which I ask all my guests, but through what you do, what is it that you want to leave behind in the world? It's funny because me and Garrett have been talking about legacy because we're getting old. He's older than I am, but we're getting old, and I actually don't know. Some people want a street named after them or a building or something. I would love to have some kind of foundation to, I don't know, like, and depending on the day, it flips between like generally underprivileged kids and providing opportunities to mental health support, awareness, whatever it is. But in 5 years from now, that could be completely different. I don't know. Does it even matter? Like what I leave behind? I think it's kind of important, the work that you do here. But I want to make an impact, a positive impact on people's lives, whether that ends the minute that I'm gone or whatever. I don't know. And it's really cliched to say, but I mean, I don't know. I don't think about it that much. I don't think about I think about what I'm going to do next, but I don't think about what I'm going to leave behind too much. Yeah. No. Well, if I could say something, and, thank you so much for your time today.
Oh,
but I think that what I see in you leaving behind is, I always feel like after a conversation with you or after time spent with you, I feel better than when I arrived. Even if I was in a good mood, I'm like, that was great. I feel energized. So I feel like you probably do that for many others.
Oh, well, thank you for saying so.
Yeah.
I feel that way leaving our talks too.
Yeah.
So maybe that's what you do as well. You're a healer. But yeah, sure, I'll take that. I'll take leaving it better than I left it.
Yeah.
No, leaving it better than I came into it.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to live.
Yeah. Oh, no, I agree.
Well, I look forward to our next conversation, whether it's recorded or not.
Yeah,
me
too.
But thank you always for your time.
Thank you, May.
If you enjoyed that last conversation, be sure to check out more episodes of The Craft on Spotify and guest photo galleries on the website at wearethecraft.com. Thanks again for listening.